Today, we're diving into something that literally dictates the quality of your entire life, both personal and professional, every single day. We're unpacking Justin Bariso's incredibly practical framework from his book, EQ Applied, The Real-World Guide to Emotional Intelligence. If you're completely over abstract psychological theories and just want concrete, actionable tools to handle this complex world, and those difficult coworkers with total clarity, you are absolutely in the right place.
So be honest with me for a second. Have you ever fired off an angry email that you instantly regretted the absolute millisecond you hit send? Or maybe you snapped at a colleague or a loved one just because you were totally stressed out? Look, we have all been there. That sudden rush of heat, your heart racing, that impulsive 2 a.m. reply all disaster. Yeah, that's actually your primitive, evolutionary fight-or-flight brain completely misfiring in a modern workplace setting.
All right, let's jump right into the roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover 1, the real-world EQ, 2, mastering your inner self, 3, the 3 faces of empathy, 4, relationships and conflict, 5, the dark side of EQ, and finally, 6, lifelong habits.
Okay, section 1, the real-world EQ, the primitive brain in a modern world.
Standard definitions of emotional intelligence, they can honestly feel a bit robotic. It's like you're supposed to just suppress all your feelings and act like a machine. But real-world emotional intelligence is the exact opposite of that. It's your ability to bridge the gap between a stimulus and your response. It's all about making your emotions work for you instead of against you. You're not turning off your feelings, right? You're becoming the active director of your life rather than just a passive victim of whatever mood swings by. Think about it like this. Fear can cause you to panic and totally freeze up. Or, if you manage it correctly, that exact same fear can be channeled into this absolute laser-like hyper-focus right before a massive presentation. That is real-world EQ in action.
Moving on to section 2, mastering your inner self through self-awareness and self-management.
To actually master that inner self, you first need to develop what we call an internal observer. This is basically a part of your mind that just kind of watches your physical and mental reactions, but without immediately judging them. You've got to learn to separate feelings from facts. And honestly, this is one of the most vital aspects of self-awareness. Look, your emotions are valid experiences, absolutely, but they aren't always accurate reflections of objective reality. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean a colleague actually intended to undermine you in that morning meeting. Just because you feel anxious doesn't mean a situation is legitimately dangerous. Having high EQ means you treat your feelings as highly useful data points, not as absolute, undeniable truths. So, when you feel a surge of frustration, your internal observer steps in, notes it, analyzes the data, and checks it against the actual facts before you react.
And that brings us to what is perhaps the single most important concept in this entire explainer, the EQ process. Okay, so a trigger happens. Let's say someone totally insults your work. Instantly, your primitive brain, the amygdala, wants to completely take over. It wants to fight. But to actually be emotionally intelligent, you must insert step 2, the pause. This is this intentional tiny gap you create between a trigger and your reaction. It is literally the difference between snapping back immediately in a tense meeting and taking a deliberate, slow sip of your coffee just to collect your thoughts. Taking that tiny pause allows the whole physiological storm in your body to just settle down. It gives your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex, the crucial seconds it needs to catch up. And once it does, you can move to step 3, a deliberate, chosen response.
Now think about how you typically handle criticism. Receiving feedback is essentially the ultimate test of that pause. Naturally, our egos absolutely hate criticism, right? We get super defensive, we make up excuses, or we just go straight on the counterattack. But Bariso really challenges us here to separate the message from the messenger. Even if the feedback is delivered with a terrible tone or by someone you really don't even like, or maybe just with exceptionally poor timing, there is almost always a grain of truth in there. And finding that truth while completely ignoring the clumsy delivery, that gives you a massive competitive advantage.
So how do we actually pull this off in real life? By following a super practical 4-step framework for handling feedback. When you're criticized, whatever you do, do not defend yourself immediately. Step 1, listen, just listen. Step 2, thank the person for their perspective, which, by the way, completely disarms them instantly because they are almost always expecting a fight. Step 3, process that information privately later on. And finally, step 4, use it to grow. By deliberately moving through these specific steps, you take what feels like a really painful personal attack in the moment, and you transform it into highly valuable data for your own long-term success. It's a total game changer.
All right, on to section 3, the 3 Faces of Empathy, and Social Awareness.
So empathy isn't just passive pity. It's actually a highly active, deliberate cognitive skill, and it comes in 3 distinct flavors. First up, there's cognitive empathy. This is simply the ability to understand another person's perspective. For example, it's understanding exactly why your boss is so stressed out about an upcoming deadline, even if you personally think their timeline is completely unreasonable. Second is emotional empathy. This is about sharing those visceral feelings. It's like physically feeling the tension in the room or sharing a colleague's joy or sorrow on a real physical level, truly validating what they're going through. And third, the ultimate goal, is compassionate empathy. This one combines the first 2 and actually drives you to take practical action, like stepping in to take a low-priority task right off that stress boss's plate. When you utilize all 3 of these, you build this profound sense of psychological safety within your teams and your relationships. But here's the catch. You cannot have empathy without active listening. Studies show that most of us only remember about 25% of what we actually hear. Crazy, right? Why is that? Because we aren't truly listening. We're honestly just waiting for our turn to speak, busily preparing our brilliant counter-arguments in our heads while the other person is still talking. Real active listening requires giving your full, undivided attention. It means actually taking your phone and putting it face down on the table. It means noticing nonverbal signals like tone and posture and using open-ended questions to really dig deeper. When people feel truly heard and deeply understood, you'd be amazed at how fast their defensive barriers just melt away.
Section 4, Relationships, Influence, and Conflict through Relationship Management.
This right here is the true culmination of EQ. It combines everything we've talked about so far. I want you to think of every single relationship in your life, whether that's at work or at home, as an emotional bank account. Every interaction you have is either a deposit or a withdrawal. Deposits look like showing genuine appreciation, keeping your promises, and having the sheer courage to admit when you've messed up. Withdrawals, those are things like harsh criticism, breaking trust, or ignoring your commitments completely. If you are continuously making deposits, your account balance gets really high, and when that balance is high, trust absolutely flourishes. Plus, if you occasionally mess up and accidentally make a withdrawal, it's easily and quickly forgiven. But if your balance is chronically negative, literally every single interaction becomes fraught with suspicion and friction.
Now, having a high bank account allows for incredible influence, but we really need to explicitly contrast influence versus manipulation. They might look kind of similar from the outside, but their core intent is entirely different. Authentic influence is built on mutual trust, understanding authentic needs, and actually working together towards shared goals that genuinely benefit everyone involved. Manipulation, on the exact other hand, is just selfish deception. It's using emotional tricks, like guilt-tripping a coworker to do your work for you, or gaslighting someone into doubting their own memory, just to exploit people for your own personal gain.
And let's be real, because we interact with other complex human beings every day, conflict is totally inevitable. Now, low EQ individuals tend to treat conflict like it's this zero-sum war. Someone has to win and someone has to lose. But high EQ individuals, they view conflict as a prime opportunity to discover the truth. You navigate it successfully by intentionally de-escalating the emotional volume. And it's actually a super simple trick. If they get loud, you get quiet. You actively look for shared ground. And above absolutely everything else, you protect the other person's dignity. You always offer them an honorable exit so they don't lose face. That is how you turn a potential opponent into a real collaborator.
Okay, Section 5, the dark side of EQ in protecting yourself.
Here is a really fascinating plot twist for you. Emotional intelligence is essentially just a tool. And like any tool, it can be entirely weaponized by those who have really high skills but super low moral integrity. Bad actors will actually use EQ to precisely pinpoint your vulnerabilities. They'll use excessive praise and flattery early on just to lower your defenses. They'll purposefully create this artificial sense of urgency, telling you an offer expires in 10 minutes, so you literally cannot use the pause to think rationally. They will play the victim to weaponize your own natural empathy against you. Or they'll make these tiny deposits, like small, unsolicited favors, only to demand massive, completely unreasonable returns later on. By understanding these exact tactics, you realize they are deliberately trying to bypass your critical thinking. So how do you actually defend yourself against this stuff? Well, whenever you feel pressured or confused or even overly flattered, you have to invoke the pause to step back and analyze the situation objectively. Give your rational brain the time it needs to spot the manipulation. And please remember, saying a firm, respectful no is not selfish. Setting clear, unwavering boundaries is a vital form of self-preservation. It protects your mental energy for the people and the goals that truly actually matter. Finally, Section 6. Building lifelong emotional habits through daily practice. The truly great news here is that emotional intelligence is not some innate talent you are just magically born with. It's a muscle. Thanks to neuroplasticity, you can actually rewire your brain's default responses through deliberate daily practice. And here are some highly actionable routines you can start doing literally right now. First, spend just a few minutes every evening reviewing your emotional highlights and lowlights. Ask yourself, when did you lose control today and why? Second, surround yourself with high EQ people. Our brains naturally absorb and mimic the emotional tones of the people we spend the most time with. And crucially, when you inevitably slip up and lose your temper, because you will, don't fall into a spiral of shame. Treat your slip-ups with compassionate self-awareness, extract the exact lesson you need, and just focus on your general direction, not absolute perfection. Which leaves us with one final absolutely vital question to think about. Emotional intelligence isn't just some fascinating psychological theory, it is a daily, active practice. So, the very next time your heart starts to race, the next time a difficult coworker triggers you, or the next time you're about to angrily fire off a response without thinking, how will you use the pause today?